This is how they break up hurricanes. They just ram it with this thing, and then they just fall apart. Right. I don't know what that is. It's a sensor. You'll learn about pretty soon. Look at these engines. Oh my God, they're so massive. That's going to be 12 feet high. 4 huge engines. That's good. I wonder if they can operate on one. Looks like it's about 20 feet off the ground. It's hard to get a scope of how big it really is. Maybe if I walk right underneath it, we'll have a better idea. I'm 6 feet tall. No problem.
Some research with us?
That's Isaac holding the canister?
Yeah.
What's he teaching?
There's something about the sensors that's on that he, and that's a science type website that's being developed for, I think.
And what's your name and what's your job?
Okay, I'm Bill Reed. I'm the director at the National Hurricane Center in Miami.
Oh, what a pleasure to meet you. I'm Tim from Cape Cod, meteorologist here for 20 years now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, where'd you get your background in meteorology?
I'm a Lyndon State College grad.
Ah, there we go. Okay.
I think Jim Cantor is our claim to fame.
Ah.
You know, and Tony Petrarca and Russ Murley.
Cool.
And I'm the class of '87. Where did you get your education?
Texas A&M. I got a bachelor's there in 1971 and then went back after a tour in the Navy for a master's degree in 1976.
A master's. Wow. So what drove you to become a meteorologist, and then how did you get to where you are now?
Well, interestingly enough, I was born in South Weymouth, Mass, not far from here. Moved there. My father took a job with DuPont down in Delaware in 4 years later, so I grew up in Delaware, and the East Coast snowstorms were my fascination as a kid. And Ash Wednesday storm of 1962, I believe it was, he ended up on jury duty, and that's how I learned that people got paid money to do weather. And from there, it just was a matter of finding a school that would accept a mediocre high school student, and that's how I ended up at A&M, and the rest is, as they say, history.
I almost want to talk more about New England weather. Did you come up, were you around for any of the hurricanes? I remember Bell just missing us in the late 60s.
I'm trying to remember, I was in Officer Candidate School up in Newport in summer of '71, and there was a couple of tropical storms. They weren't full-blown hurricanes then, but Carol and Edna and Diane in the mid-50s all affected Delaware. And I remember those as kids, so that was kind of cool.
So you learned from the Air Force or the Navy?
No, I was degreed before I went in the Navy, and the Navy used my degree, and I became a weather officer in the Navy, and I actually flew hurricanes in '72 and '3, albeit they were pretty light years before the Navy got out of the business on this kind of
Orion P3?
Yeah, I actually was on Agnes in a P3. That was the first storm that the Navy flew a P3 operationally in reconnaissance.
What is one of the most dramatic experiences you had doing that?
A storm that never hit land. We flew out of Bermuda called Hurricane Ellen. In 1973 was a huge storm. It took all day to fly it, and it was about 100 knots. We're flying it down low level. Very exciting. Back then we flew them at cloud base to get.
What do you mean fly it? What's the mission when you get there?
Well, there are unique patterns you fly, and primarily you're flying to find the maximum intensity and how broad the eye is, how broad the wind field is going out. Now we fly them at higher altitudes because we have sensors that can gather data all the way down to the ocean surface. That way you get a much bigger picture of the storm. It's safer also to fly it at that altitude.
I heard the pilot talking about getting struck by lightning and how he closes one eye so he can keep on viewing.
Yeah, you lose your flash. In fact, the physical I had to take in the Navy to be an air crewman. That was one of the things they did. A very high intensity flash and an altimeter. They measured how long before you could get it. And they accused me of not wanting to pass the test. I was so slow, and I said, I want to fly on these things, guys. Sorry if I had been a pilot. But you see the wires that go up on the they're a very common place for a lightning strike on the plane itself. Is to discharge where that grommet attaches to the tail. Then they have this wire banging on it's a HF radio, and they have the wire banging on the plane. You have to land and cut off the wires when that happens. And I had that experience twice while flying And it wasn't in the hurricane flight, it was just flying, it was transiting back in between thunderstorms.
Now, as a meteorologist, I have a tough time trying to stay calm and professional when there's a hurricane coming, especially if there's a hurricane warning. But then inside, there's part of us that always say, well, it'll be very interesting to see a hurricane. So how do you balance the enthusiasm with the professional stay calm aspect?
But I guess through experience is the most part. I mean, pretty early on in my career, I'd experienced enough of the damage, destruction, and loss people go through that it's all serious now when I'm working a storm. Watching them on satellite and on radar and all that, the scientist in me gets involved. But when they're coming into a landfall, it's all business.
Do you get more thrill from a nor'easter or a hurricane?
Oh, anymore it's a hurricane. There's no question about it. There's still about a lot of mystery on the evolution of the intensity aspects of a hurricane. So there's an unknown factor. My boss, who's a gentleman named Dr. Louis Uccellini in Maryland, actually wrote a kind of a textbook, if you will, of East Coast snowstorms. He did a lot of his research on the mechanics. When I was flying the storms, we flew a lot of winter storm reconnaissance because we didn't know that yet. Now the models do a pretty darn good job of forecasting.
We had 2 storms in the last 2 years that appeared to be hurricanes, but there was snow falling from them here in eastern Massachusetts. 2 lows that deepened to about 9. One was 964, yeah. 2 Februaries ago. Is there any correlation between the dynamics of a hurricane and an intense New England snowstorm?
Not really. I mean, the dynamics, the process, there's a small portion, there's a small portion of warm process going on anyway in there, but by and large, it's the conditions that lead to a really deep nor'easter would kill a hurricane in very short order. The cold air, the shear, the dry air,
yeah.
Those interactions. In fact, the lowest pressure I've experienced on land was when I was stationed in Keflavik, Iceland, of all places. 946, the big old occluded winter storm came across there.
We haven't had a Category 3 in New England since 1954, I believe.
Yes, Carol.
When's it going to happen again?
If I knew, I would probably be able to claim a bigger salary. And I think you're right, it's the when, not the if.
What's going to happen when it happens here in the Cape Cod and southeastern Massachusetts area?
Well, unlike the Gulf Coast in Florida, where it's fairly uniform and flat, and the bathymetry of the ocean is very similar from in a specific place, it's going to be highly dependent on exactly where that core of maximum winds comes across at a Cat 4 level. But where it does, people there are going to experience a storm tide they've never seen before and probably don't expect. Probably wind damage that they've never seen before and probably don't expect. That's almost a given the experience elsewhere with the top end of ice.
By definition, that almost makes it impossible to prepare for it and be ready.
Well, I've came to the conclusion that if you have your local officials and your media on board, and they train people that says, listen, you're not going to believe this when it's coming, but when I tell you have to leave, you've got to believe me and follow those orders.
Did Katrina teach us more about how to do that?
I think Katrina was a positive event on the warning side. I mean, the people, by and large, when they got it, that there was a warning out and they're being ordered to evacuate, left. We had 85% compliance.
Right.
A challenge you may have here, I don't know the demographics that well, but the more elderly your population, the less likely they are to leave.
Would you say that's your primary mission, this preparedness?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you need both. You need the science of the meteorology and you need the preparedness. If people aren't prepared, all the good science in the world is for naught. They're not going to even know that there means them.
Thank you very much, Bill.
You bet. Hi, Mom. No.
Very nice to meet you. Bill from Weymouth, Tim from Dennis.
There you go.
You get a lot of fans around here.
Cool.
Earl, that was a close call, wasn't it? Came all the way across the ocean, was coming right at us. We were in Wellfleet, and boom, right out to sea. Key was when Earl went by Hatteras, it was moving fairly slowly. There were no real hurricane conditions in Hatteras, and it veered off to the right, moving at about 18 knots, just slow enough to miss New England.